In an age of outrage, I thought it might be helpful to just give some kind of calm thoughts based on 10 years of trying to understand the migrant crisis and how it actually works. It is slightly ironic that the queen of outrage is now the one trying to be calm in the face of outrage, but maybe that's just because the world is insane and everything that used to be is not as it was. But here's some points to help understand what's actually going on. Firstly, there is only a problem in the country or in our countries if it interrupts money or power. So something is only actually an issue at the top level if it interrupts money or power. And the migrant crisis, whether it's boats arriving, whether it's asylum centres that are packed to the brim and overflowing, whether it's petrol bombs being thrown at a shelter, whether it's attacks in the street, whatever, it's only a problem, actually, if it interrupts power or money. And migrant crises do none of those things. In fact, they create more power and they create more money. So both of those things are constant, and anything you hear is just huff, puff and bluster, because the two things that are most important to those that run this globe of ours are not being impacted. In fact, they're being bolstered by what is being called a crisis. Secondly, the movement of human flesh was always an incredibly profitable industry. So people talk about slavery and they lay on the emotional issues around that, and it becomes this sort of terrible, terrible thing about our past, and Colston's statue has to be thrown in the river. But in truth, people weren't moving people for fun. They were doing it because it was highly profitable, and that has remained constant through time. The movement of human flesh remains one of the most profitable industries that there is. And that is not to suggest that it is the people moving human flesh that are the only ones making a profit. Actually, the most lucrative profits are made at a much higher level, at a much more powerful echelon in our society. We want to blame Albanian people traffickers, but they're not the ones actually making most profits from this, because if they were, this whole racket would be stopped. So then you ask yourself, well, who is profiteering from this racket? And that's where you have to look behind the headlines and the bluster and the pictures of migrant shelters overwhelmed with people, or people fighting with kind of sticks in the street. And I've spent, 10 years, 12, 15 years living in the migrant camp at Calais, called the Jungle, if you recall, living in the suburbs in Sweden, in Rinkeby, where the migrant population there simply swelled and overwhelmed an entire area, and all the subsequent problems that follow. I've spent time living on the border in the south of America, where ranchers there are intimidated out of their own homes by the sheer volume of people passing over their lands. Spent time with border control there. Spent time in the most northerly part of Europe that there is, in Finland, where they have a migrant deluge, despite being in some snowy hinterland that's dark for most of the year. What I'm trying to say is, I've been on the ground. I've spent time on the coast, 3 months on the coast in southern Italy, working with the Coast Guard, Border Force, the people that live there, the charities that are ferrying migrants to the country. That's how you understand this problem. And then you realise that for the powerful, it's not a problem at all. And I bring that up not like some sort of, kudos to me, just because the understanding is that people imagine that, these desperate people, these asylum seekers, they arrive and they want a new start. That's not true at all. It's never been true. They bring all their old animosities and their old hostilities with them. If you went to the migrant camp at Calais, there's the Albanian bit, there's the Somali bit, there's the Afghan bit, and that's separate from the Iranian bit. Everybody's still separate, hostile territories, and they bring that hostility, which is why you're seeing it now. And if you dare speak about it from a position of knowledge or understanding, If you dare do as I did and go to these places to properly live amongst these individuals and speak quietly to them in the hours in between the things, if you sit on the side of the end of the dock where the boats come in, the charity boats that bring the migrants, and you watch quietly, you have an understanding that enables you to see that this is actually still the age of slavery. This is actually still just the industry of moving flesh and the profits from it that go into so many hands but end up in the hands of the most powerful that there is. And let me give you a little insight into that. So when I was writing honestly about this, and probably came as close to the truth as you could put into mainstream, in the initial phases that involved my arrest and interview under caution and threats of prison time and the losing of my jobs and all the rest of it. But if you knew the individuals that came to take my job from Men Online, you would understand who is profiting from this, who it matters most to. So there's different religious groups. A religious group, we'll call them A. They much prefer it when white majority, Christian majority are sort of diluted. They much prefer it when there is not one sort of homogenous population, because that is perceived, historically, it has been taught to be a risk to their safety. Religion B is involved because those new arrivals are typically of their faith. They are swelling the numbers of their own religion. And religion C is involved from a profitable standpoint. You speak to anyone on the southern Italian coastline and they'll tell you all roads lead to Rome when you say about where the profit line for this thing is going. 3 different religions, all invested in the movement of human flesh. Then there's charities, which of course the word charity suggests something that is of old. Charities are just large corporations and incredibly profitable ones because of their margin that they can achieve. There are significant, powerful charities, corporations attached to political parties involved in the profiteering of the movement of human flesh. We think of Save the Children and you get an idea of people saving children. What I found, in fact, was women cast on the roads in Italy working as prostitutes under a gang because they'd been trafficked across, and their flesh was generating profits for the gang members, but of course the real profits were going much higher up the chain. And then there's political groups. So there's certain political groups that benefit from political talking points about migrants. So let's think build the wall, or let's think about Conservatives tough on migrants, oh tough. Or think about left-wing political groups who we support this, we welcome everybody, these are dreamers, bring them in because they'll vote our way, we'll put them in accommodation, we'll look after their medical needs, we'll keep them dependent and they'll vote for us, we'll keep them on the plantation, so to speak. Religious organisations, political groups, and everybody closest to power or financial beneficiaries of the movement of human flesh don't see this as a problem. They see this as a highly lucrative industry that must be protected at all costs. So maybe for those that have stayed with this, just bear that in mind today. Watch how they throw out a person, Suella Braverman. Watch how, Farage on BBC. Watch them show pictures of the migrants rioting because they're overwhelmed by numbers. Watch pictures of boats arriving. Watch all the distractions you're being thrown, because none of them will take you or point you towards those who are making significant profits by enabling the movement of human flesh, modern day slavery, to continue. There, a little quiet thought in the background from a voice that you're not allowed to hear, and for good reason.